Thank you for coming. This is a great turnout. A note of caution, I've been told to ask you to stay out of the bike path, which is right there, as much as you can, okay? All right, thank you. On behalf of Los Angeles County Public Works and Ethnic Media Services, welcome to today's news briefing. To inform all of you and the communities you serve about the release of the final Los Angeles River Master Plan. If approved by the Board of Supervisors next month, this plan would launch a historic effort to reimagine the Los Angeles River and mark a major step in equity for the river's diverse communities. A special thanks to all the reporters who have joined us on site at the Public Works Imperial Yard overlooking the LA River. And welcome to those reporters who have joined us online via Zoom. Hi, everyone. I'm Pilar Marrero, by the way, Associate Editor of Ethnic Media Services. The release of the master plan follows a 4-year planning process commissioned by the LA County Board of Supervisors, which involved thousands of community members and a broad multilingual public outreach effort. The plan addresses longstanding issues of infrastructure inequity. Its goal is to both improve the health of the river ecosystem for current and future generation of Los Angelinos and to enable local residents to thrive in their neighborhood and not be displaced by gentrification. Our speakers include Keith Lilly, starting here next to me, Deputy Director of the Los Angeles County Public Works Water Resources Core Service Area, Dr. Wilma Franco next to him, Executive Director of the Southeast Los Angeles Collaborative, Sissy Trin, Founder and Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Community Alliance, and Tensho Takemori, Partner with Gary Partners, Project Architect and Planning of the project. Along with these speakers, key subject matter experts will also be available, who speak other languages as well, for one-on-one interviews between 12 and 12:30 after the formal briefing concludes. They include Carolina Hernandez of the LA County Public Works, Mark Hanna, where's Mark? Hey. Senior Principal, Geoscientech Prime Consultant, Jessica Henson, Partner with OLIN, Project Landscape Architect, Planning and Urban Design, and our friend, John Christensen, from UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation and the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, who helped oversee EMS's multilingual poll about the LA River last year. You might remember, we gathered last time. We ask our speakers, as always, to speak slowly because we have interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean. After each speaker, we will open the briefing to reporters for questions specifically posed to that particular speaker, and if not, we'll figure it out. We ask online reporters to enter questions in the chat box as well. As always, we will email all attendees a video of today's conference along with extended bios and contact information for all the presenters. So here we go. We begin with the first speaker, Keith Lilly. He's Deputy Director of the Los Angeles County Public Works. And he will give us an overview of what implementing the master plan will involve. Mr. Lilly, please begin.
Great. Is this on? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Keith Lilly. I'm Deputy Director over Water Resources for LA County Department of Public Works. It's an honor to be here to welcome you all on behalf of the project team of world-class experts and stakeholders who have all been engaged in this long process to develop the master plan. It's been quite a journey, and we're very pleased to announce that the master plan update is now available to the public. Each of you represents a vital link to the people and communities that this plan is intended to serve and help improve their lives. I'd like to thank our partners and Sandy Close from Ethnic Media Services for bringing us all here together. Before I go any further, I think it's fitting to open with a brief land acknowledgement to honor Native and Indigenous people. It's a practice that's been adopted by our county leadership to show respect for the first people of this region. We acknowledge the first peoples of this ancestral territory and the land that today we call Los Angeles County. With respect to their elders, past and present, we recognize the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash as the original stewards of the land, air, and water, and support them as they continue to lift up their stories and cultures. Our intent with this statement is to show respect, honor the truth, and encourage more substantive, sustained action to correct the narratives and practices that seek to erase Indigenous peoples' histories and cultures. This meeting is very fitting for today. It's a reminder that we're stewards of this land, both the natural and built environment, for future generations. It is with current and future generations that were in mind when we developed this master plan update. We seek to foster a more positive and equitable future for all LA County residents. The LA River was originally channelized, and by channelized, if you look out here, you see this wide 400-foot concrete structure that's designed to carry the floodwaters away. It was necessary to protect communities and people as Los Angeles developed, but we recognize it can do more than just provide flood protection. So now, 20 years after the original master plan, Supervisor Kuhl and Solis spearheaded a motion in 2016 to update the plan for even broader community needs. We now have nearly 1 million people living within a mile of the river. And it's essential that we elevated those voices and those community concerns we all have. We are now delivering a plan that reimagines the river as a complex system in which people, places, and the environment are encouraged to coexist, intermingle, and thrive. The plan focuses on multi-benefit approaches, solutions to address flood risk, environmental health, increased open space and access, and recreational opportunities. And while this channelization that transformed the river over 100 years ago, or nearly 100 years ago, we look forward to transforming the river yet again, this time with an eye towards equity, holistic and multiple community benefits, and cultural identity. Before I open the floor to questions, I'd like to reintroduce Carolina Hernandez, who's been Public Works lead on this project. With that, we'll take your questions.
Do we have any questions? Jorge.
How are you going to be sure that in 5 or 10 years, when this plan goes ahead, there will not be gentrification, especially for communities of color? Can you assure that?
We've made every effort to address that. In fact, the master plan has an entire chapter that looks at housing issues and gentrification potential. And there's a toolkit that provides information. Individual communities along the river that have land use planning authorities, they can use these toolkits to implement programs and practices that avoid that practice. And it enables us to understand what those potentials are before a project is proposed or approved.
Yeah, it's better.
Is there any possible way that your project will be designed for emergency evacuation from the beginning to where it access to save millions of people away from the tragic or from the traffics? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a complex question if we look at how we can use the river corridor for other purposes such as moving people or some evacuation. The plan as it's written is not intended as such, but that's something that we can look at and during emergencies consider how it can be used.
Thank you.
When you say you're looking forward to transforming the river yet again, and you refer to the plan from 20 years ago, how would you characterize the transformation that occurred at that point? We'll hear more about the new one, but what's going on in the last 20 years?
Yeah, I actually was referring to the transformation from a prior to channelization to now, but the 96 plan did did recognize other needs than flood protection. It primarily looked at signage standards and planting standards for vegetation to add, as well as bike paths and walkways. It was not as broad as the current plan that looks more at items such as housing, arts and culture, other broader ideas than just a biking and planting corridor, if you would.
Hi, how are you? Just would like to ask, as you know, from San Fernando River, San Fernando Valley up to LA downtown, you could see all the homelesses around this river. And also you could see a lot of old houses. And what's your plan to make sure that all these homelesses, they're gonna be in shelter or find the houses for them? And how about all these houses, you're gonna evacuate them or what's gonna happen? Thank you.
Sure. So there's really two issues there. One that the gentleman first brought up with ensuring that our improvements to the river as the plan gets realized and implemented, that we don't make things worse, that we are cognizant of how the improvements can affect the cost of living in that area. We want to maintain the communities as they are. Separately, the housing crisis, the homeless crisis is a broader issue that the LA County Board of Supervisors is addressing through other venues than the master plan.
Last question, and then we'll move on, okay? Before Angelinos can visualize what's going to happen or what they want to happen, we need to get to know what this river is. So can you tell us about the water that we're seeing right now? For example, when it goes up, when it goes down, how will you manage that along with the projects?
Thank you for that question. So as you look out today, I mean, this is a massive channel. It's huge. You see some flow in what we call the low flow that includes some of the runoff from urban areas, some of the from the recent rainfall. There's still some runoff, and some of the water treatment plants have effluent that flows through the river. But when it rains, this entire watershed, so we have 834 square miles. When it rains, all that runoff from all these concrete urban areas rushes into the river and it flows. And it would be as high as these bridges that the water would flow. Now that happens not as often. People have lived here and said, I've never seen it full. They've been here 20 years and maybe seen it half full or 3/4 full. But as climate change evolves, as we expect to get more frequent and more intense storm events, and we're more likely to get those design conditions that would have this river running full. So we, in designing this plan, recognize that we can't reduce the capacity of the river. We can't just take out the concrete and plant trees there. To add any element, you have to widen the river or provide more space for it. So it's critical that we maintain the capacity to provide the flood protection for our communities.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, we will move to our second speaker, and that is Dr. Wilma Franco, or Wilma, I'm sorry, Executive Director of the Southeast Los Angeles Collaborative, and that is an umbrella network of nonprofit organizations serving the communities of Southeast LA, who will share what's at stake for them in the LA River Master Plan. Dr. Franco, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank for, as was shared, I represent the Cela Collaborative. Our collaborative is a network of organizations. There's 12 members that are part of our network, but we've been working on this larger kind of network in the Southeast, what we call the Cela Leaders Network, which represents more than 200 leaders doing work here in the Southeast. So I do want to provide that context because our work is through our partners, right? And then so I know a lot of our partners have been engaged through this process, and I think
Dr. Franco, please slow down a bit for the interpreters.
I forget about that part. My apologies. So I think for us, why this master plan is important is because our organization and our work really focuses in the Southeast LA region. That's from Vernon all the way to Linwood. That's the way that we as an organization define Cela. And our work is really uplifting the nonprofits, right? But also ensuring that as all of these investments, as all of these plans are carried out, and developed, that the community voice is at the center of what is really going to influence and drive, the master plan, the work, the implementation. And I think one of the things that, I wanted to share, right, and I know this is important to all of us, is what does our community want in Sela, right? Our community is 94% Latino, low income, hardworking community, right? That has historically been disadvantaged, right? Because of the area that we live, right? I think oftentimes, and there's a lot of research that shows, right, that the quality of our life is impacted by the zip code that we live in. And unfortunately for our communities here, we have some of the highest air pollution numbers. We have some of the highest obesity, asthma, really bad water quality, right? And then so as we think about those pieces, right, what our community really wants is to really see this investment be something that's a benefit to the community. The biggest concern that we consistently hear from the Sela community is the potential risk of gentrification and displacement, right? Our communities, as you all know, have been devastated by COVID. And part of that has been because of the historical challenges that our community experienced, right? But I think the process, right, including community, including our partners, has been great. And we look forward to continuing that partnership, right, and continuing to be at the table. But I think, this creates a lot of opportunities, right? A lot of what we heard is not only the housing issues, but also jobs. How do we ensure that there's access to green jobs and a pipeline programs that really, benefits this community? Are these jobs going to be for our Sela community here? How are we planning, right, and preparing for that future? And then, we want to be able to use it. I think one of the things that we try to highlight for folks, right, is that in every indicator in the county, whether it's air quality, whether it's health, whether it's park access, Sela always is the hot red zone. And that is an injustice to our community. And then so we look forward to continuing to work with our colleagues at the county, the supervisors, with all of the elected officials here in the region to really make sure that as we implement this master plan, right, that it's first and foremost to the benefit of our community and that it becomes accessible to our community.
Thank you, Dr. Franco. Any questions? Jorge.
When do you think that I'm sorry. When do you think that this plan is going to be implemented, number one? And second, who's gonna pay for it?
That's a great question. I don't know that I can answer that. But I think, I think the plan is there, right, is in existence. I think is really thinking about what are those funding opportunities that are becoming available through ARPA. One of the things that we released last year was our Sela agenda, which is actually in alignment very much with the master plan as well. So looking at what are those opportunities to really ensure that there's resources coming to this region to really move forward the master plan. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, just, the plan outlines kind of what is possible, what's reasonable, what are for each area, what are the needs that can be addressed and how can those be addressed? It does not have a blueprint of exactly what's going to be built, when and where, and how it's going to be paid for. So we're going to continue to work with our communities, with the legislatures, with the state, with the feds. How do we get funding? How do we, when we do have funding, how do we leverage that to get other funding through grants and projects? So it's really going to be, this is the first step, is outlining what's possible, and the next step is those efforts to make it happen.
Now, Dr. Franco, I wanted to ask you, because you talked about the concerns. Obviously, the concerns must be first. But what are the wants and needs? What are the visions of the community? Access to parks, access to open space, arts. I mean, all those things, we need it too.
Yes.
So
yes, and thank you for the question. I think there's definitely excitement, right? We definitely want to see more park, more open space. I think, we, as you can tell, right, we see a lot of bikers go through this. A lot of this community uses the river as a space where to exercise. So I think there is the excitement, right, about the open space, the parks, the ability to really kind of enjoy the river and actually have it be, and look like and feel like a river, right? And then so I think that's extremely important. I know that there's a lot of plans around, for example, the urban orchard project as well as the Sela Cultural Center. I think those are pieces that for many years our community has been saying there's a lot of culture and arts here in the Southeast. How do we honor that? How do we celebrate that? And how do we utilize that as a way to continue to inform these projects and ensure that we don't lose that focus, right, of the community that does exist here and all the assets that come with that.
So right now, what is the way that these communities use the river, if at all?
They do. I think, there's a lot of runners that go up and down the river, right? I know there's a lot of elected officials also do like bike tours. Some of the organizations like East for Environmental Justice does tours here to just really kind of educate the community around the river and then also how you can utilize it. I know I've come out here and ran with my friends. I mean, it's hot, but I've done it.
Not today. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Franco. Let's move on to our next speaker, that is Ceci Trin, founder and executive director of the Southeast Asian Community Alliance, who will discuss how the master plan addresses the issue of housing, homelessness, and gentrification, and the effort now underway to create a land bank for affordable housing. Mrs. Trin, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Sorry, it's a little hard to tell with the gray. My name's Ceci Trin. I'm the executive director of SICA, and we do organizing, policy advocacy, and youth leadership in Chinatown. I think most of you probably don't know, Chinatown's actually one of the poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Many of the residents we work with are one rent increase away from becoming homeless. And another thing that most people don't realize, we're a river adjacent community. Unfortunately, you don't see it because you have Union Station and the Men's Central Jail blocking our access, but we are in fact next door to it. And we've been kind of working on river advocacy for maybe about 10 years or so, kind of specifically addressing the issues of and concerns around gentrification and displacement. Because what we were seeing was that a lot of developers and real estate agents and brokers were basically touting the river master plan and the proposed improvements as a buying and selling opportunity, right? That real estate values were gonna skyrocket and that people should take advantage of the new green infrastructure improvements that were coming in. And so then we started talking to other river adjacent communities, trying to kind of find out like what's going on and how are people feeling about the plan. And what we started seeing—
Please slow down for the interpreter.
Okay, sorry, sorry. And what we were seeing was a lot of community members and residents actually fighting against parks and fighting against greening, not because they didn't want it, but because they were more afraid of losing their housing and their homes. And for us, we were in this place where, do we fight having a nicer neighborhood, or do we just give up and assume that it's going to happen and our communities are going to get pushed out into the streets, right? And for us as SICA, we just kind of was like, there has to be a third way. There has to be some other solution, right? And so we met with like the public works team and with a consultant team, and we're just like, this is an issue. It needs to be addressed, right? And of course, Public Works is not a housing agency. So there were many moments, Carolina can attest to this, where it was like deer in the headlights, like where do we even start? This is such a huge issue, because as everybody knows, it's the biggest issue statewide, housing and homelessness, right? And I think the first, it was just, let's have a conversation. Let's brainstorm. Let's come up with some ideas and see what sticks, right? Like we're not gonna solve the problem, but we can't do anything if we don't acknowledge the problem exists. And so I'm actually really proud of what actually came about, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably the first infrastructure plan that even acknowledges the issue and wants to proactively address the issue, which is huge, right? And I think it's the first plan nationwide, because I've done a lot of like conferences and people are always like, what's the solution? And I get to point to the River Master Plan as one example. And so it outlines a ton of different strategies, but one of the first and most important is to not just acknowledge the issue, but identify what are the threats. Every community has different needs, different priorities, and different strategies. So it doesn't come up with one strategy, a one-size-fits-all solution. It gives a bucket of different tools that each community can work with the county, with public works to identify and implement for their specific neighborhood. So for example, in Chinatown, the big issue for us is deeper affordability, right? A lot of our residents are too poor to qualify for affordable housing, right? And so that's going to be a different strategy than, let's say, Downey, where it may be affordable home ownership, right? Again, acknowledging that there's going to be different solutions, but that part of it is going to be identifying what are the opportunities. You know, I think the master plan opens up doors to partnerships with different county agencies and nonprofits. And so one of the things that we're also pushing for is the establishment of an affordable housing land bank, with the idea of, like, you know, we know that new investments are coming in. Let's look for strategies before real estate prices go up, right? So let's acquire properties for new affordable housing or for preservation of existing housing, you know, in the early stages when we're still kind of in the planning process before the real estate speculators come in, right? And so then we can buy land and stabilize communities before any threats happen. But again, you know, it's a lot of different tools that's in the plan itself and the toolkit that comes with it.
Thank you so much. Questions? Mike, over here, please. Right here in front.
Hi, this is Wendy from LA newspaper. Our questions is, do you have like any planned activities like to make people know about the LA River? I heard that you talk about like people use bike, you know, like you see bike lane, you have some people running. I'm a runner as well, but not many people know about this access. So, I mean, I would say it's tied into the budgeting, right? Because, you know, we have a limited tax, you know, that we can spend so much on many projects, right? But if people are not aware of that, then, you know, they're not see that why we have to spend money on this. Any plan, any ideas to kind of like make people aware of this?
So I think the challenge for us in our neighborhood is that there's not actually really good access. Our families and our students actually cross the river like 4 or 5 times a day, right? So they may live in Lincoln Heights, go to school in Chinatown, you know, or work in Chinatown, go back home. So they see it, but they don't realize it's a river. They just see it as a bridge. And there's no actual good pedestrian access in Chinatown and Lincoln Heights. So for us, we would have to, and we have done it, is to take partner with different nonprofits and government agencies like Community Nature Connection or like San Monica Mountains Conservancy. And we like have buses that take students to different parts of the river, but to actually like experience it, unfortunately, just the infrastructure around where our neighborhood is, it's just not good for like going into the river unless we want to risk a lot of people getting hurt.
Excuse me, could you a little bit clarify the criteria of a Chinatown and the Los Angeles River plan? Could you a little bit, and what's your criteria, object, suggestion? Do you have a plan for that? Because a little bit confusing, or you know, because we're not familiar with this, and I'm really trying to clarify to get a point that what you're trying to help us to understand how the LA River master plan can benefit Chinatown. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest benefit from my perspective is that the master plan calls for all these strategies to address housing instability, gentrification, and risk for homelessness. I think, you know, a lot of affordable housing can be seen as a tool to prevent homelessness, because most people who are falling into homelessness these days are people who are not mentally ill, right? Who don't have a drug addiction, they're just poor, right? And they can't afford a rent increase. And so then they end up on the streets. And so the master plan has all these strategies that can and should be implemented in Chinatown to protect all the low-income seniors and families, right? And again, like, I think it's hard to imagine Chinatown and the river, but they're actually right next to each other. It's just that there's all the buildings, like I said, the Men's Central Jail and Union Station, that block visual access. So people don't even realize it. I didn't even realize it until one day I was on the phone with Tencho. And I was like, why are you involved in this project? And he was like, because it's next to the river. I was like, oh, right.
So we have some questions from the chat on Zoom, which are hard to transmit. So let me ask them of the panel. What is the involvement of state and federal authorities financially? And maybe that's a question to ask after Tencho.
Yeah.
But let me just make sure our folks on Zoom know that we're paying attention. And there's another question, which I think is for you, Ms. Trin. What types of communities are benefiting from the project from your perspective? Asking you and Dr. Franco those questions.
And then we'll move on.
I will say that historically, low-income communities and river-adjacent communities have had to live with the twin injustices of substandard housing and environmental degradation. And I think that the master plan actually seeks to correct both, right? And to stabilize both issues. So I think that's like the biggest benefit that our communities will see.
Thank you. I think I would just add, I think the master plan does allow, right, for this, you know, we're moving away from like a one size fits all, right? It's really kind of allowing different jurisdictions, different municipalities to really look at what works for them, for their community, right? And then so I think that's part of the key aspect of the plan, right? It's not, this is how it's going to be for everyone, because all the communities are very different. And then so I think it allows for that space of how do we continue to engage communities so that this is a benefit to the community that lives there.
I don't know if this, okay. About the federal and state funding, is there any involvement?
Yeah, I mean, the state legislators that have the regions along the river are interested. They've been briefed. Will as projects get proposed, certainly funding will be solicited from them, as well as, you know, we have the federal infrastructure law, you know, the bipartisan infrastructure law that's available. We'll be looking at how can we help get federal funding for projects such as this that benefit multiple communities, disadvantaged communities throughout the Los Angeles region. And this is just an outstanding example of the type of projects that are intended to be funded by the federal government.
Thank you so much. Let's go to our fourth speaker, and that is Tensho Takemori, a partner with Gary Partners, project architect and planning. Mr. Takemori will help us understand the master plan, you know, and how it reimagines the LA River.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here representing the consultant team that worked on this plan. So in addition to myself, acknowledge my colleagues at Geosyntec and Olin, Mark and Jessica here, as well as my other colleagues here at Gary Partners. Together, three of our firms started on this journey about 8 years ago, probably with the goals to see what could be addressed in terms of the water issues in the open space and ecosystem, different issues along the LA River and in our region. And I think what we've found over the past 4 years directly working with Public Works is really the result of a master plan that's far more diverse in addressing a far-ranging kind of need of the societal issues of our region. The plan is an extensive effort in assembling a community of a steering committee with very diverse and unique perspectives, extensive community engagement along the entire length of the LA River, and very thorough data analysis that clearly shows what the different needs are at different points along the river. And the result is a plan that categorizes everything into 9 goals that are some of the issues you would expect around water and open space and ecosystems, but also addresses things like arts and culture, access, and most importantly, equity. A lot has been talked about here. Goal number 6 in the master plan addresses affordable housing and people experiencing homelessness. The plan acknowledges that large-scale infrastructure improvements can create pressure on our neighborhoods, but there are proactive measures that the communities can embrace to mitigate these things so that they can thrive in place. The idea is that the people that live in these communities remain in those communities to enjoy the improvements that hopefully come over the next number of years to the Los Angeles River. Parallel to this effort, the county itself, the Board of Supervisors, passed more than 13 motions on this topic itself, and there's another one in the process. Sissy mentioned land bank. We've actually been working together parallel on this, and that is also in the works with the Board of Supervisors, this creation of the land bank, which is one of the actions outlined within the master plan itself. The plan recognizes the unique and diverse ecosystems and biodiversity that's along the river and tries to enhance that to create a stronger environment that we can all enjoy. It understands the effect of climate change and the pressures that puts on increased flood risk and urban heat island effects, as we're feeling every once in a while here when the sun comes out, for sure. Those of us with a chair on the top of our head. The plan does not propose a final design for the whole LA River. Many people have asked us, what's it going to look like? And we've given examples of what it could look like in different areas, but the result of what it's going to look like is dependent on each neighborhood once. It's really a framework that creates a kit of tools for different opportunities, and it's going to be that furthered community engagement, also allowing what the river allows at any given point along the river, given a whole compendium of different pressures that have to be allocated and decided by the local communities in terms of what those priorities are. The plan is based very strongly on this community data that's been gathered during its development, and it's created this framework that empowers the local decision making. How about that? The community data gathering part is very important because we believe that that really does empower the local communities to believe they have a voice in what the river is for their communities. And the framework is there really to guide these multiple conversations that we hope are occurring concurrently, some of which the county has already started concurrently that we participated in. But the end result, we hope, is 51 miles of connected open space that connects greater access to open space, but also connects our communities. You can see even here, this river at this location could be a great opportunity for open space and access to recreation and ecosystems, but it also could connect the community that lives on the right side with the community that lives 500 to 1,000 feet to our left. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Questions? You over there? Who has the mic? Oh, no mic.
In the long run, it's a beautiful plan. However, right now, we have the biggest issue right now is the water. And you can see the drought and also everything happening right now. Do you have any plan to address this issue immediately or just
What issue are you
The
talking
water
about? Oh, the water.
drought.
The
yeah.
drought.
I
yeah.
think that is a beautiful plan for long run, long term, but immediately we need to solve the problem of water shortage. So do we have any plan for that or?
Yes, so the plan acknowledges the water issues. I mean, already we should acknowledge the resources the county put forth in water retention and putting water back in our water basins. It depends on the location. There's the balance of how much water we can grab during some of these rainstorms, which there is an extensive system, but additional studies are being done in terms of what can be captured. But we also have to be realistic about the other role of the river as it's currently designed, which is flood risk protection. I too started, I think we all started with, we should capture every single drop that flows in this river. But just to give you kind of a sense, when that large storm that Keith was talking about comes, this 100-year storm, at this point right here, In downtown and between Long Beach, it's somewhere between 100,000 and 160,000 cubic feet per second of water. Just to give you a sense, Niagara Falls is 85,000. So you're dealing with a really large volume of water that's very dangerous. Yes, we want to capture some of this, and we do everything we can. I think the county's continuing those efforts, but there's a balance between the two things that has to be clear, I think.
We can't hear you. Oh, no.
We have a question from the San Fernando Valley Sun on the Zoom, and I'll read it in the interest of time. Does the master plan support moving forward toward a more sustainable plan, or does it envision little changes sort of step by step as communities are involved? For example, concrete embankments and concrete floors that encase much of the LA River, will these be lessened as each community gets involved? What is the plan for the concrete?
Concrete is the big question. Our team did study this pretty extensively. There are some areas that are already existing, such as in the Elysian Valley, that have a soft bottom. There may be some areas that are available for the existing channel to be modified in some fashion. But the reality is a majority of the Los Angeles River, to serve its function of flood risk mitigation, needs the ability to convey the water safely during these large storms. In the area we are right here, the levees we're sitting on were built to protect some of the neighborhoods on either side in the 90s. The communities have been built right to the embankments. The only way to remove the concrete, when you remove the concrete and put planting, the river moves slower. So the river must be wider. So the only way you can do that, if you want to remove all the concrete, is to make the river somewhere between 3 and 7 times wider, depending on where you are. And that's land on either side of the river, which could displace a very large number of people. That's not an approach that we took. We do not believe that the plan should embrace displacement of any of our communities. We have to find alternate solutions in areas where removing the concrete may not be possible, but it certainly is not ruled out by the master plan. Where it's possible, it should be investigated as an option. But in the areas where we can't remove the concrete, we need other tools in order to provide improvements, much needed open space and ecosystems for our neighborhoods.
Yes.
And
Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I just want to know what's the plan or project that you're gonna put as you're consulting with the project for the minority community, like a Muslim community, Arabic community, Indian community, Pakistani, all this community, how are they gonna inform them with this project? Because as you see, we always know about this project from the ethnic media when they invite us as an Arabic newspaper. But how are we going to make it big to inform all this community about this project? Thank you.
I think that's a great point, and I think this is just the start. While we may be coming to the kind of conclusion of launching the plan here, we hope in a month when it comes before the Board of Supervisors, we really see this as a beginning point. And that's deliberately why the plan doesn't provide a final design for the whole river. We don't think that's the correct approach. While we've done an extensive engagement, there's 10 million people in this county. There's a lot more conversations that have to be had to come to solutions that each of the neighborhoods embrace. There's a website that will be launched. We hope this is just the beginning of the outreach and the engagement for communities to become further involved. But that's the deliberate approach, is to create a framework so that the communities can further their discussions before decisions are made on exact designs in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Takemori. Let's go now. Oh, okay.
Can I add something to that? I'm sorry. Can I add something to that?
Please go
Yes, I
ahead.
just wanted to add in terms of the question that you had and about just kind of sharing and making community aware, right? I think that's where for us, right, as the network of our nonprofits, right, it's important that we engage our nonprofits, right? Our nonprofit organizations are the safety net and are the trusted messengers in our community. And then so I think it's vital that as we move forward, right, in order to make sure that all of our communities are informed, that we have those partnerships with the CBOs doing the work, because they already reach community. And this is the way that, we can really ensure that they're aware of the projects as they move forward.
Okay.
And so I kind of wanted to piggyback off of that question and off of that answer. Is anyone here from the Tongva, Fernandino, Gabrielino tribes at all? And so that's kind of my question. I mean, the land acknowledgement is great, and I know Rudy Ortega has been involved with some of the planning, but I know that a lot of the Tongva tribe does not feel represented in some of the planning. So how do we make sure that a wider range of tribal people, native people, original people from the Los Angeles area feel involved in some of the planning that's happening?
Yeah, you are correct in that Rudy Ortega was on our steering committee, and we've had other outreach events with the Native American community. But it's what our panels have said. It's be engaged, reach out. The majority of this has been tell us what you want, tell us what you need, and then we aggregate those asks and interests into formation of the plan and to elements that can achieve those. So it's that continued engagement. We'll reach out. We hope they reach out as well. The website has opportunities to express interest. We have events that will be scheduled as individual areas have projects proposed. Let's just keep the conversation going.
Okay, we have only a few minutes left. We have other discussants here that I want to give them a voice, as well as the four presenters. Let's give our reporters an idea of why this is such a groundbreaking plan in terms of putting equity first. I know we have a lot of, as a reporter that has done this for a long time, I would be very aggressive in asking all these questions. But you guys have been working on this for 4 years or more, 8 years, as you mentioned. These things are in the master plan, which you can access here. Okay, this is in your packet. You can scan this and read the master plan, which is also the job of a reporter to actually read. Okay, any of the other discussants that want to have a comment about the reinvention? Carolina?
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Again, my name is Carolina Hernandez. I'm an Assistant Deputy Director at Public Works, LA County Public Works. And okay, thank you. So once again, just before I get started, I want to just express my gratitude for coming out today. My gratitude to the panelists, to our steering committee of 41 members, but really to community. And you guys are representing community today by coming out. And so this is a very important day for me personally, because I had the privilege of working on this plan. But really, I see this as a huge step forward. And really, and I forget which one of the panelists mentioned this, but really this is the beginning. We have been engaged in developing this plan for several years, but it really, today's the beginning. And that's because the plan is launched, it's out there for the public. And I hope that come June 4th, that it will be viewed by our board and we can move towards implementation shortly thereafter. And really, why is this so important? Well, as a civil engineer, I have the privilege of being a part of a plan that you've heard really is unique in the country. And really, it's unique because of the people that live in LA County and the environment in which we live in. And so for someone like me with my profession, this is a great privilege to be able to come here where we have all of these great opportunities and some difficult tasks ahead of us. And we get to be here together to provide for opportunity in all of the different areas you mentioned. So this plan has 9 major goals. And it was based, and if you look, get to go into the website, it's really based on this pyramid approach where we went to community first, really engaged as a water resources engineer. That wasn't really always the first line of approach. I want to solve a problem, right? I want to find out what the issue is and go straight and solve the problem. But a lot of that takes listening, and it takes you being here today, us communicating with you, and this prolonged conversation that we've heard already needs to take place. So in that, we had those conversations with community, and they told us this is what we want. And then we coupled that with the data. And I think that's what's really important. You have a community basis with the data on top that really created these fundamental 9 goals. And these 9 goals point to everything that you've heard today, from water quality to art and culture to housing and displacement. Things that I never would have imagined would be in a master plan for arguably a flood corridor. But really what it is, it's the LA River. And so it's so much more than that. It is so much more than just a flood corridor. It is, in fact, a river that is important to all. I want us to begin to turn towards the river instead of putting our backs to it, and allow for community to do that, because frankly, that's what they've asked. So that's why it's so unique, because it is an opportunity to begin this discussion, but in a way that we've already said we're ready to implement. Here is your cookbook. Here is the plan. Anywhere, we're not going to dictate, it's not prescriptive, but where you want to go and where you live and what area is important to you. Along this 51 miles, you go, you pick up this plan, and you can say, this is what, scientifically speaking, my community needs, and this is what my community has said they want. Let's get there together. And so that's why this plan is important.
Okay, let's give a chance to Mr. Hanna over here.
Do I have to follow that?
Yeah, it's hard, I know.
Thank you, Carolina, and thank you everyone for being here. And special thanks to the LA County Public Works, Keith, and your entire team. It has been a fantastic process to be able to work with, as Carolina mentioned, civil engineers. I'm a civil engineer myself, and to have these eye-opening moments to work on issues that I, quite frankly, never imagined I'd be able to work on with. And of course, it's because of some of our great partners in Geary Partners and Tensho Takamori and Jessica Henson over at Olin, and their amazing teams as well. So I did hear some questions about water supply, and I know drought, and these are important issues. County Flood Control District and Public Works recharges the groundwater basins around here that provides enough water for the city of Long Beach in a year. So just along the LA River. And so, right, we also have, they also operate spreading grounds in the San Gabriel River. And I think questions like that can come after this. But I really think this is a monumental moment to think about this river as a connector of communities, not just from the top of the system to the bottom of the system, but from right bank to left bank and everywhere in between. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Jessica to give a couple notes as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Henson. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer with Olin. It's been a pleasure to work with the county and with some of the nonprofits and with our design team, with Tensho and Mark along these years, and all of our incredibly talented staff. The LA River is so interesting. If I were going back 100 years from now ago, maybe we would have made a different decision. Maybe it wouldn't have been concrete. Here we are today, like Tensho said, with communities right up against the bank, and we have to call ourselves as designers to be more creative. What can we do that takes community into account, that looks at underserved populations, looks at pollution, looks at environmental degradation, and how can we actually think about a framework that allows those communities to say, I want this here. And so that's what's so exciting and what's so revolutionary about this plan. It's about as forward thinking in terms of planning strategy as you can imagine, as a framework, as a toolkit, and as a way of the county saying, like Carolina invited, come work with us. And so as a person that you're not going to find anybody here that loves ecological systems and plants and wildlife more than me. So if you have questions about that, happy to take them after. But I think we can do really incredible things along and in and over and around the LA River in the coming decades that will really make our environmental and community health intertwined. And I'm going to turn it over to John Christensen to maybe say a couple of words as well here.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'm John Christensen. I teach and do research at UCLA in the Luskin Center for Innovation and the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. And I'm a founder there of something called the Laboratory for Environmental Narrative Strategies. And I'm really grateful that you all are here. Last fall, we conducted a poll with Ethnic Media Services and the Study LA, the Center for the Study of LA at Loyola Marymount University, one of the premier polling organizations in Los Angeles. And we conducted the first ever multilingual public opinion poll focused on the LA River, and specifically really for all of you. And what we found, and there's a press release from back in September in your packets, but I just want to highlight a couple of things that we found. One is that most LA County residents are familiar with the LA River, and the vast majority support river revitalization efforts, despite the fact that fewer than half of them have ever visited the river, and only 1 out of 10 have visited the river many times. This support is true of people who live near the river, as well as people who live farther away in LA County, and it's very consistent across demographic groups, and including ethnic groups. But only 1 out of 5 residents are aware, or were aware at the time. I hope more are aware, thanks to your work, are aware of the county master plan for the river. But large majorities support many of its goals for improving the river, as well as the work that you've heard today to prevent displacement and ensure that communities along the river can thrive in place. And they believe it could become a world-class attraction, like rivers in San Antonio, Texas, Seoul, Korea, Madrid, and Spain. And so I'd be happy to, I want to quote Fernando Guerra here, from the Study LA at LMU, who said, "Our poll found that Angelenos are brutally realistic about the state of the LA River. They know the challenges, but they're also realistically optimistic. They see what needs to be done to revitalize the river that runs through our region, and they support those efforts. And for the first time, we're hearing a clear message from a representative sample of all Angelenos that they want to get this done." And I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I hope that you'll also use this opportunity to establish ongoing relationships and connections with the folks who are involved with this, to involve your communities in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I will close down this Zoom conference. Bye, everyone. With our thanks to all the online attendees, and welcome all of you who are here to break for refreshments and one-on-one interviews with speakers or experts. Thank you so much for being here.